Welcome to Sigest, your fortnightly serving of digestible science from plant and food research.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to Sigest. I'm your host, Hilary Ireland. Climate change, population growth and urbanisation are just a few of the very significant forces shaping future food production systems. Change and innovation in response to these forces are leading to development of new food technologies. With all change, progress tends to go smoother when we take a moment to understand people's attitudes towards and perceptions of the future change. In today's episode, we build upon a previous episode aired in October 2023 and hear about new insights from the Future Urban Consumer Program with our guest, social scientist, Dr. Brian Lin. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, happy to be here.
Before we dive into the research, let's get to know you a little bit. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your role here at Plant and Food Research?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a social scientist here at the Plant and Food Research, and I have a research background in consumer behavior, tourism, sustainability, and also marketing. And I'm more like a quantitative researcher, I would say. So mainly I use survey or experiments to understand different social phenomena, especially human behavior in different contexts.
Sounds fascinating. In the previous episode about the future urban consumer, we were introduced to the stakeholder and consumer research team, which you're a part of. Can you briefly recap what the team does?
Yeah, sure. So in our team, we have researchers specializing in both qualitative and quantitative research. And we tend to see ourselves as a social scientist. So we're trying to look at what people think, what they behave, and also why they make certain decisions. So in some of our projects, for example, we look at what products would be more interested to consumers and how they feel about the products and whether their perceptions toward the products may be different according to their culture, locations, or even their personal characteristics. So this can help us better understand what products will meet the future needs of different customers. And this kind of information we think is also important for marketers, retailers, and even producers as well. Yeah.
Sounds like a very busy job. Can you remind us again, please, what are the main aims of the Future Urban Consumer Program?
Yeah, so this program is mainly consumer focused, as it's trying to understand how people interact with horticulture products or horticulture technologies. So trying to develop consumer psychology by identifying how culture or other social aspect could influence people's decision-making or choices in terms of novel food, such as cell culture food or genetic editing food. So this can provide insight that inform the development of novel food that hasn't been common in the market, and also better understand people's perception in diverse culture.
So why is it important to do this?
So the reason why it is important, we think, is because climate change or population growth could have impact on the availability of food resources. And using new food technology can help address this kind of challenges because these technologies can increase the safety or nutrition or even the productivity of the food. And it can also ensure that the food is produced in a more ethical or sustainable way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the question or the problem is that consumer may not see this as important or advantageous because they may have a lack of understanding or awareness to this kind of benefits, which could lead to skepticism to this type of novel food. So that's why it is important to understand about what people think about this new food technology and also whether their culture could influence their perceptions, because people in different markets may have different reasons to choose or maybe not choose the novel foods. And understanding this can also assist marketers or policymakers to know how to address concerns people may have and gain trust from them as well.
Excellent. So let's move into a little recap of the research methodologies used in this study. In the previous episode, we learned about perceptions and attitudes towards new food technologies from the team's qualitative research study. And here we learn about the insights derived from a quantitative research study. What's the difference and why do both?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So in the previous podcast, they shared the findings from our qualitative study. And today I will mainly just focus on the quantitative part. So the reason why we did both was that understanding human behavior could be really difficult because it's hard to predict. And using both method could provide like a more robust or comprehensive understanding of consumer. So qualitative research, like what we did, we use like interview and focus group. So this can help us have an in-depth understanding of like why people want to choose the novel food. And because during the process, they can freely express their ideas or opinions. And on the other hand, like quantitative research, its aim is trying to like generalize the findings, usually based on a large number of samples. So, and also it can test kind of like the correlation between construct. So both type of method has its benefits. So they are like complementary to each other. So that's why we decided to use both method in our research.
Excellent. So did the results of the qualitative study inform the design of the quantitative study, or were they disconnected?
So at first, we did like a literature review. So we first trying to understand like what has been done in the literature and if there were any gaps that need to be explored further. And then we had the qualitative research. And like I mentioned, we used like interview and focus group. So to have a first understanding of what people think about the novel food. And then the findings from literature review and qualitative study, it helps inform the design of our survey and experiment for our quantitative research.
Okay, excellent. And what were the main aims of the quantitative study then?
So there are two main research aims in our quantitative study. The first is to understand consumer values toward new food technology across different countries, such as New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and China, etc. So when we're trying to reach this research aim, we ask participants or ask people like, what's your expectation of future food technologies? So the questions may be like whether they think the future food technology should produce food that is tasty or has good nutrition benefits, or whether it should be affordable. And we may also ask them questions like whether the technology should help reduce the harm to the environment. So this can help us understand their values towards the new food technologies. So this is the first research aim. The second research aim, we focus on how different message framing affect what people think about new food technologies. So there are different types of messages. So for example, we may have the information emphasize how technology can bring benefit to the environment, or how technology can address the issue of food security. Then we can see whether the message framing could have impact on consumers' perceptions towards the new food technologies.
And when you say perceptions, is it mostly about acceptance, or is it other paradigms of perception?
So in terms of the perception, we mainly focus on two things. One is whether we'll be willing to try the new food, new technology, like food technology products, or whether they think the food is safe.
Okay.
These are the two main things we ask about their perceptions.
And just to clarify, when you were talking about the questions for the consumer values towards future food technologies, when you were asking those questions, was it specific to a certain technology, or was it just food technologies in general?
For the consumer value, we ask the questions like novel food in general.
Yes.
So we didn't specifically focus on maybe cell culture food or genetic editing.
Yep.
But when we use the message framing to see the differences of the consumer's perception, we did focus on different technologies. So there are three technologies we focus on. The first is the cell agriculture, and the second one is genetic editing, And the third one was control environmental agriculture.
And cellular agriculture, that's essentially building tissues in the lab.
It used like animal or plant cells to produce food and usually produced in the lab. So it can make sure like the food can be produced without worrying about like weather conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you briefly tell us how the research was conducted?
Yes, sure. So we used survey to collect our data. So the survey was assigned to 8 different countries, including Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, UAE, China, Vietnam, and Singapore. And when we collect the data, we also ensure there's a balanced representation across demographics, such as gender and age. And regarding the sample size, the number is quite large. We have over 14,000 participants in total. And each country, we had around 1,800. So this can help us ensure the findings will be more robust and can be generalized.
Let's dive into the research findings then. The study explored consumers' values towards future food technologies, as you mentioned before, in terms of the first research aim. So how did they compare between countries?
So I will highlight some interesting findings here. So for example, like we found in most countries, people still pay attention to like the tangible benefit or what we say the practical benefits of food. So this means when it comes to the choice of novel food, they focus on whether it can have benefit such as like nutrition, safety, and also whether the taste is good. So this is quite similar to like nowadays how people make decisions on the food choices. On the other hand, we also found like what we call symbolic value, which is rated as kind of like the lowest among most of the countries. And this value basically means that people don't think novel food can link to their personal identity or make them feel they belong to a certain social group. So this is really interesting because like some other type of food, like organic food, the reason people choose organic food maybe because they feel good or they think they are doing something good to the environment. And this kind of identity will trigger them to purchase organic food. But this kind of association was not found in our study. And yeah, if we look at countries, some countries in particular, like New Zealand and Australia, they really care about the sustainability of the novel food. So this means when it comes to the choice of novel food, they not just focus on the practical benefits, they also think about whether the food is produced in like an environmentally friendly way. And we think this might be because people here in New Zealand, we have a strong connection with nature. So our culture really value the sustainability. And other than New Zealand, we also found like in Japan and the countries UAE. So people from these countries, they are interested in the experience offered by the novel food products. So this means if the novel food can provide any different experience, such as new flavor, new taste, or maybe new color, they can make them more interested in the novel food. We think this like because of their culture as well. Like in Japan, their culture embrace like innovation or cutting edge technology. So this make them want to experience something new from the technology, like the novel food.
So it sounds like the findings aligned with the contexts of each country, with New Zealand having a strong value of clean, green environment, and in Japan, for instance, being quite intrigued by novelty. So were there other cultural aspects considered as part of the research?
Yeah, we did also trying to identify other cultural aspects that could have impact on consumers' like value, such as like religion or social economic aspect. But we're still working on the analysis.
Great.
So yeah,
That's great. Yeah, excellent. Good to know it was considered, all those other aspects. So the study explored the impact of message framing on consumers' willingness to pay and risk perceptions related to future technologies. How did the impact of message framing influence consumer attitudes and perceptions towards future food technologies then?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, we use different type of message framing. For example, if the message emphasized the food security, we found countries like Singapore and UAE, people there may be more willing to try novel food. And we think this is because, like, okay, Singapore, they don't have enough land or space for farming. And so they need to rely heavily on the food import. And if there's any disruption in the food like supply chain, it could lead to like increase of the food price. And similarly, UAE, because of their like desert geography, it's hard for them to do traditional farming because like of their climate or water scarcity. So they also rely heavily on food import. So we think these are the reason why when they see the message or information about food security, it increased their willingness to try the novel food.
The food technologies, right. So they're open to all sorts of different technologies if it addresses the issue of food security.
Yeah. I think if we look at like uncontrolled environmental agriculture, they are much willing to try, but cell culture food or genetic editing food, people tend to be less willing because people may feel because these two types of technology are more advanced and more unfamiliar with it. But the cultural environmental agriculture, it can be more linked to like traditional farming. But we found like the message focus on the food security. It also increased people's willingness in countries like I mentioned, like Singapore and UAE, to try like genetic editing food and maybe also cell culture food as well.
Okay. And what were the other findings? Were there any other findings around willingness?
Yeah. We also found some other type of message framing could influence people's perceptions. So like environmental messages. So what I mean here is if the message showing how new food technology can bring benefit to the environment, countries like New Zealand, Australia, and also China and Vietnam, people are more willing to try the novel food. And it is not surprising that we see this in countries like New Zealand and Australia, like I mentioned, because we have like a strong connection with nature. But in China and Vietnam, we think could be because agriculture is like really important industry in these two countries. And many people, especially in like rural area, they rely on agriculture for their livelihood. And also they are like a major food exporter, like agriculture products such as could be like rice, coffee, vegetables, and seafood. So they need to make sure that agriculture is sustainable so they can continue to produce the food in a more sustainable way. And so we think that's the reason why also these two countries are really value the sustainability in their culture in terms of the agriculture. Other than that, we found like if message emphasizing how novel or innovative the food technology is, people from most of the country like New Zealand and Australia will increase their perceived risk of the food products. So this means that people will increase like the hesitation to try the novel food because of the uncertainty of the food, we think. But this kind of finding was not found in countries like Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we found here was really important because you need to know about the cultural background of each country and know what are the right message in different markets.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some sort of key knowledge gaps potentially that could be filled with the right kind of information. If people are uncertain about a technology, maybe just providing more information about the benefits and limitations of the technology would help with that risk perception. Were there other elements of risk perception?
We also ask participants their perception, like whether they will support the government to maybe invest more on this kind of technology. So these are other perceptions we're still working on the analysis at this stage.
Fantastic. And to summarise then, what are the key takeaways of this research at the moment? It sounds like it's there's still more to come, but at this very moment?
I think there are three main key takeaways in our research. So the first one is the importance of understanding consumers' attitude and behaviors toward the food technologies, because we think it's always important to, if you want to know about the market, it's important to know about your consumers in that market first.
Yeah.
And the second key takeaway is the culture sensitivity, because culture is a really important element that could influence people's perception and also values. Yeah, and the third is knowing how to use the right message or information to gain trust from consumers and also help address the concern they have. So I think these are the three key takeaways of our study.
Okay, thank you so much. So what are the next steps then for the research?
Yeah, because this research, of course, can be explored further. So we were thinking like maybe to focus on other maybe psychological factors that could influence people's perceptions toward novel food. And we were also thinking doing maybe like a longitudinal study, because people's perception may change over time. And so maybe we don't know, maybe like after 5 years or even 20 years, what people think about the novel food may change. And we will also try to publish our findings to like academic journal.
Okay, good luck. Good luck with all of that. So yes, I mean, now more than ever, we need innovations that protect food security, food safety, and most importantly, our environment. And it sounds like you've found that clear messaging around the new technologies, the benefits and limitations is really important. So thanks to the wider team for your efforts in providing insight in this space. It's been a pleasure talking with you today, Brian. Thank you for taking the time to share the insights on this study.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you out there for listening. If you'd like to know more about the topics covered on SciGest, check out the episode pages on the Plant and Food Research website. Please also feel free to subscribe to the SciGest channel and rate and review each episode. Thank you and mā te wā.